Okay, so my name's Lindsay. I am the Deputy Director of Youth Organizing over here at 482 Forward. I work very closely with Molly Sweeney, who I think you know, and with Juanita Zuniga, who I believe you've met, and Arlisa Hurd and some other folks. So, but specifically, I do a lot of our youth organizing work. And so the youth have been working since early summer to come up with the questions that they wanted to ask the school board candidates, spending a lot of time thinking about their issues and the things that they appreciate about DPSCD, as well as the things that they'd like to see different. So they put a lot of thought into these questions, and then they've been doing interviews with the candidates. I think we're going to end up interviewing either 14 or 15 of the 18 candidates, so pretty good response rate. And we usually have 4 or 5 youth on each interview, kind of alternating through the questions. So it's been really cool. And then we're going to put together videos. So how that's going to look is it'll show a youth asking one particular question, and then it'll show like all the candidates' response to that question. And so that's kind of how those videos are going to look. And then we'll post the full interviews as well on our website. But yeah, just as kind of a reintroduction to 482 Forward. So we are a coalition of Detroit organizations who work with youth and families across the city. And we specifically work around education justice issues. So sometimes those are community-wide campaigns, and sometimes those are neighborhood specific. Let's see. So yeah, I think that's all I've got, but basically we'll go through these questions. I know you've got a short amount of time. I do too, because we have another candidate coming on at 7 o'clock. So just make sure that you're answering the questions thoroughly, but succinctly as well. So I guess just to start us off, if you could share your name and pronouns for the record, and then share a little bit about what's your connection to DPSCD and why are you deciding to run for re-election on the board?
All right, thank you so much. I'm Corletta J. Vaughn, and I am definitely she, her, and I am excited about DPSCD. I am currently a board member. I was elected 2018, so I've served from 2019 until 2022, and I am running for re-election because I love the work of the reform that the current superintendent and board has been working on. COVID kind of knocked us out for 2 years, and I'm excited to get back to work and finish some of the things that I have initiated with the board.
Thank you. So our second question is, how would you, or how have you in the past engaged the community, specifically students and parents, in making decisions about our schools outside of school board meetings? So basically, how will you go above and beyond for students and parents?
Several of the initiatives that I have put in place were 100% community driven. I have come onto the board knowing that it was basically a policy writing board. But because of my entrenched community relationships, all of the initiatives such as bullying, talking to parents and families, that was a huge issue when I first came on the board. Human trafficking, that information came to me from students who were concerned about other students. And so I rallied faith-based leaders to help me with that initiative. Homelessness, which has been a huge issue in our district. More than 3,000 students are homeless in our district. Community-driven efforts to make sure that they had coats for the winter, to make sure that we could help locate them, because without an address, it's hard to locate them. So going to the community, finding families, entire families that were in shelters or displaced, living from house to house, someone living in tents, someone living in cars. And so the community was certainly involved in that. I have relied very heavily upon my community relationships to help with the initiatives that I have championed on behalf of the board. So I didn't just sit at the board table and write policies. I actually went into the community to try to solve some of the problems and find remedies for the issues that the community brought to my attention.
I appreciate that. It's certainly not only in schools, the issues that impact our families, for sure.
Correct.
So the next question that youth have is, we know that the school board has a policy in place about the possession of weapons in schools, but there's an exception to weapons under the control of law enforcement personnel and items approved by the building principal as part of class or presentations. In light of recent issues regarding gun violence within schools, do you think that the policy should change to not allowing any weapons in or around the schools from anyone?
Well, recently we have put in place the initiative that any weapon that is found by a student, on a student, with a student, is confiscated. And so we have not been lenient in that at all. And the beautiful thing is that other young people will tell you when another young person has a weapon. And so it has not been police agencies, it has not been even administration. It has been other young people who will notify a teacher, a staff person, another young person, a principal, that they have seen a weapon with a child. And so I will certainly look back at that. But I think recently we have tightened that policy up, that any weapon that is found by a youth, on a youth, or with a youth is confiscated immediately. And there are certain things that are done with that youth, as notifying the parent or the guardian, and that child is not allowed back into classrooms. So that policy has been tightened up recently, very recently.
Okay, and I think the youth were also curious and concerned about law enforcement officers and personnel having guns on campus as well. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I do know that law enforcement, some law enforcement officers do have weapons, not all, and none of our security personnel have weapons. And so you will see a security officer, hopefully, in every school, but you will not see a law enforcement officer in every school. And so I think that over the last year or so, we have eliminated a lot of the actual Detroit Public School Community District Police from the schools, but they are on property. They are driving around the community, but security officers do not have weapons.
Okay.
And they are in every school.
Gotcha. Okay. And the final, and then I'm gonna switch it over to Azalea. Hi, Azalea. The last piece of this question is that right before school started up, DPSCD sent out a robocall stating that they're going to be investing more money to bring back police officers on school grounds, like you said, on the grounds, not necessarily in the schools. And so we're curious if you agree with that decision, and if not, where would you like to see money spent instead?
We very much agree with that decision. We are in a current environment where schools have been accessed by strangers who have brought harm to both students and property and administration. And so we are very concerned, and parents drove that concern. It wasn't the board that drove that concern, it was parents. One of the number one issues that parents are having is school safety. And we were very, very concerned, not that our officers would be in the building, but they would be around on the property, particularly when students are coming and going to school. That seemed to be a time when students were most vulnerable and staff was most vulnerable. And so I'm very much supportive of protecting people in our school buildings and on our school properties. And that was certainly, I believe, a way in which we could secure and make our students and our parents. It's something about when parents pull up and they know that that building is protected, that they want their child to come into that school building. It's something about that principal, that administration that says, okay, they're not in the building, but we certainly know that they're close or they're in the vicinity. Sometimes students will not even see them because they are in the community, and they can prevent certain things based on what they have been trained to spot early. And that's what we want. We want things not necessarily to be addressed while they're in process, but to prevent them from happening. So it's very, very, I think, important that our own, not the city police, but our own officers who have been trained to de-escalate problems, to work with young people, to work with parents and families in a very different way than the city's police department. So I'm very much hopeful that we will not have any tragedies or incidents in this school year at DPSCD schools.
Me too. All right, Azalea, thank you so much for hopping on. Do you want to introduce yourself real quick? And then we're on question 5. And you and I can just switch back and forth.
Yeah, of course. Hello, my name is Azalea. I'm one of the youth members with 482 Forward. I've lived in Detroit my whole life, gone to DPS schools, so it's nice to meet you.
Good to meet you, and thank you so much for joining. I do apologize again for being late. These interviews were stacked, so one went a little longer than I had thought.
Yeah.
So thank you for coming on.
Of course, of course. Okay, so the question I have next is the state's 2023 budget includes $150 million for mental health within schools. Do you believe that that's an appropriate amount? And what would you want to see done with those funds in DPSCD? Yeah.
Well, I believe that currently, based on what we have been seeing because of COVID, the trauma of COVID, a pandemic, being at home, as well as death and dying rates, illness rates, there was quite a bit of reported mental health issues from families. And so that money was put in the budget, whereas before it wasn't there at all. And that is due to the fact that now the district has COVID dollars, and specific money has to be allocated to mental health. So finding mental health counselors, putting them in school buildings, nurses, as well as mental health professionals, based on their salary rates, because most of them were vendored out. They were not necessarily our own employees, but we did hire school psychologists, school mental health, trauma, specifically coaches. And so that is there, but we also know that that could be fluid. That amount could be fluid, and we are prepared to revisit it should more money be required in that area. But as you can probably already know, that those mental health issues driven by the community, driven by parents, is something that was brought to our attention, and that money was put in that space to make sure that every child, every family has access. Suicide, of course, was number one that came up in the interviews from parents. And so now we're hoping that that money will take care of that, but if more money is needed, it will be allocated.
Thank you so much for your answer.
Thank you.
Thanks. So the next question is, in what ways do you think DPSCD should make school curricula more diverse and representative of the student body? So that's thinking about racial diversity, diversity in sex, socioeconomic status, religion, sexual orientation, gender, everything like that.
When Dr. Vitti came aboard, which has only been now about 5 years now, curriculum went through a major overhaul. And it continues to be modified, updated. I am chair of curriculum. So the committee, anything that has to be changed in terms of curriculum, from very large modification to curriculum that took place 5 years ago, each step, every time that there is a need to add a different type of material, whether it's reading, or whether it's school sessions with diverse groups, I am personally willing to engage. I've seen policies come across the table, as well as agenda items that continually to evolve and engage and strengthen all of the curriculum to be more inclusive. We just recently voted on new curriculum for African Americans because that has been a huge issue, as you know. And so we are watching a curriculum continue to be fluid. And I think that that's the thing that, when you are on the board, policies are modified all the time. Budgets are modified all the time. Nothing is in concrete. And so I'm very happy with the progress we're making. And I'm never going to say that it's enough, but I'm happy to see us push the envelope to be more inclusive with our curriculum and our support curriculum.
Sorry, I was just making some notes. Thank you. Azalea, you want to do the next one?
Yeah, I was just about to say me nice. Okay. What is your stance on the current uniform policy in DPSCD along with the strict dress codes?
All right. When you understand the culture of DPSCD, and you understand the concerns of parents, and that's what drives us. It has to be parents speak very loudly, and their young people speak very loudly. That issue of uniforms is almost half and half. You have half of the parents and young people that say, we want uniforms. And you probably have another 40%, 45% that say, we don't want uniforms at all. And so we have been very lenient when it comes to high schoolers and uniforms. Whereas most of our high school principals are much more fluid when it comes to whether or not their body of students have to wear uniforms. And surprisingly enough, even when the principals are a little bit more lenient, some high school students just prefer to wear the uniforms. But within the high school context, it's perfectly all right. So if you go to any of our high schools, you will see that there is no strict uniform requirement. However, we do have a dress code. And that is one of the policies because of, again, the economic culture in which we serve, as well as we believe that dressing should not be the primary reason you come to school. That the primary reason you come to school is to be educated. So as much emphasis that can be put on education without distractions is going to create, I think, a better student achievement. So in the middle schools and in the elementary schools, uniforms are still a requirement because it certainly relieves economic responsibilities in the families, because if you buy the uniforms, you don't have to buy a lot of school clothes, and that helps with students. But when you start getting into the high school, we certainly have given more freedom. Dress codes, I think, are very necessary. I'm a parent and a grandparent, and you'd be surprised how outlandish some dressing can become. And then it becomes the foci of the educational process and not the education itself. And so I remember a time when there was no uniform code, and then I remember when there was. And so you have parents that say, yes, I need uniforms because I know what my children are going to wear every day. And then you have another group of people that say, I think particularly young people who drive this, we want to wear what we want to wear. So I think that in each school building, even though we have a policy with uniforms, we're a lot more lenient, but it is going to be principal and parent driven.
Thank you for your answer. Pass it to Lindsay.
All right, our next question is DPSCD just voted to acknowledge Pride Month in the school calendar. How will you stress the importance of advancing LGBTQ+ equity in classrooms?
That's not a school board. That's not a school board issue in terms of classrooms. We voted for the resolution. That was the school board's responsibility to make
sure. Or in the
that
district is fine too. Just how will you support LGBTQ+ students in the district is fine.
Well, we support every student in our district. That's my responsibility to support every student. I think the way that I was able to most support them was to vote for the resolution to acknowledge a Pride Month. And that is what school board members do. I acknowledge every student. We have a policy in place, which is the equality and equity of every child. We just put in last night with school board meeting, homeless children. We just put in that every homeless child has a right to equitable education. We just voted last night on foster care, children in foster care. And so how even children who are in foster care, who come from shelters or who come from temporary housing situations, every child in DPSCD has the right to equitable education, that there is no distinction of any child. So that community, as well as Latin American communities, Arab American communities, Pakistani community, every child, it is my responsibility to see that there is no discrimination, that there is nothing done within the district, the entire district, even with employees. Let's just move that up to staff, but no person is in any way marginalized or excluded because of gender, race, ethnicity, or religion. And that is our legal responsibility.
Thank you.
Okay. My next question, how would you increase language accessibility and translation services within DPSCD schools and in communication with families?
Azale, you must have been listening to my conversations. Last night we started our board meetings in Western High School. And one of the things that I had emphasized is looking at the culture and the languages within that Southwest community, which is primarily Hispanic and Arabic. And so we can't just have board meetings without those interpreters and being present. And they were present last night, both Hispanic and the Arabic. One of the things that I think that is very important to me, of course, obviously, is that everyone can understand what we say. And so we have hired more interpreters as DPSCD has become more ethnically diverse. And so we have all types of communication that go out. I noticed that the robocalls needed to be changed from just pure English, that we might have to have 3 or 4 different languages on one robocall. We may have to, even in our communication, our written communication, our website, everything now, because we have such a melting pot, that we are going to have to be more intentional, very much more intentional. Even in our faith-based meetings, we have to be more intentional of including translation services. And I have been yelling that for the last maybe year now, as it has come to my attention. So I'm very much in favor of improving our communication with all diverse groups.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. And I saw that Perry L was able to get on, but she did mention, just texted that she's not able to ask questions yet.
Okay.
So just enjoy listening in, Perry L. I know y'all know each other. So let's see. So the next question is around infrastructure and facilities. So during the final week of classes, Detroit schools had to end their days early due to the hot weather and many of them having no air conditioning. This is one of the many issues students face due to the condition of DPSCD schools physically. So how do you think this issue can be addressed by the DPSCD board, or what do you think needs to happen in order to improve facilities and infrastructure within the schools?
Well, that's a great question, and it's a very current issue on the table. We just received quite a bit of money in terms of COVID dollars. So about $700 billion have now been allocated to improve all of the HVAC systems in our school buildings, as well as to some schools will be torn down to be built brand new from the ground, as well as modifying every school building to update every roof, water systems, plumbing systems. So over the next 5 years, DPSCD has allocated the money for improvement. You got to remember, a lot of our buildings are 50, 60, 70, 80 years old. And so some of those systems are not even modifiable, but we are creating ways in which vendors and contractors can add HVAC, can add air condition, can update our HVAC systems, our heating systems as well, because sometimes in the winter, our buildings are cold. And so it's not just AC, it's heat as well. So watch DPSCD over the next 5 years. You're going to see some real phenomenal improvements. New school buildings are coming up, and it is our desire that every school building will have adequate heat and air conditioning over the next 5 years.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And our last two questions are pretty quick. Azalea, do you want to do the next one?
Yeah, so some of our members, I believe Periel actually, are part of an organization called My Student's Dream, which organizes at the intersection of immigration and education justice. So would you commit to filling out a survey created by our youth members, and it will be sent to you within the week?
Absolutely, yes. And just for the record, know that DPSCD has been through policy and resolution, we are a safe district. Remember, in the previous administration, immigration was actually coming into our schools and removing students. And so we corrected that. So whatever it has to do with the safety of our children who are undocumented, I'm 100% there for you.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, a lot of the parents that we work with were a big part of pushing for that sanctuary school designation.
Yes.
So thank you.
Yes.
So our last question is very simple. First of all, we just want to thank you for hopping on today, for sharing all your answers, sharing very honestly and authentically. Our last question is, if elected or reelected, would you commit to meeting with our youth within 6 months of your reelection?
Absolutely. And I would like to meet with you a couple of times a year. I think that it's very important that I have my ear to this community. I think I can bring some of those initiatives and concerns to the board. And I would be more than willing to be an ally for some of your issues if reelected. And I would like to meet with you 6 months and then again 6 months later and over the next 4 years to have my ear to what your concerns are.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I know you've got another meeting to hop on and we've got another candidate coming in, but I really appreciate you calling and still getting on here. So you got to meet a couple of the youth. So
yes, and thank you all so much for modifying your time for this little lady. And here I go to the next meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good to meet you, Miss Rags and Perry and Allison, and all I can see their names. So thank you so much.
All right. Good to
meet
you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay.